Dune Part 2. That's right, we are finally doing it. It took a minute because I didn't really know how I wanted to broach this subject. And also, I lost my voice this week, so I couldn't really talk. But Dune Part 2. It's here, the long-awaited sequel to the Denis Villeneuve movie that came out during the pandemic. If you don't remember, Dune, the first movie from 2021, was one of the films that Warner Brothers was just like, it's the pandemic, all of our movies still might release in theaters, but they're going to be straight to streaming as well. The Godzilla movie was like that, Wonder Woman was like that, Dune was another one like that. And I'll say this, I do think the first Dune movie being available streaming during the pandemic definitely helped this one build its cult classic status fairly quick. That was a time when movie theaters weren't doing well. This is going to be a very discussion-heavy video if you can't tell already. It's going to be a big discussion about Dune Part 2. Already, movie theaters weren't doing well during the pandemic, and to really have something become a cult classic in the modern era, it has to be seen by everybody, talked about briefly, and kind of already be an existing thing. I don't really know what else of the era you could call a cult classic. I say cult lightly because it's still very modern. It came out in 3 years, right? Not that cult classic-y. But because it released during the pandemic, and everyone's like, well, I'll just get HBO to watch it for a day, or I'll rent it on my TV. No issue with that. It was able to grow in popularity. This sequel was originally scheduled to come out last year, and then, again, Denis was plagued by unfortunate events he couldn't control called writer strikes and actor strikes. So Warner Brothers pushed the movie back to March, which at the time felt really insane. This does not feel like a movie that should play during March, and it's so specific that blockbuster season keeps coming earlier and earlier and earlier because we got a Ghostbusters movie this month, we have a Godzilla and Kong movie this month, we have that Roadhouse movie coming out this month, and to start it, we have Dune. Why is the summer blockbuster coming so early now? It doesn't matter. This should still feel like October, November release would really do good here. Hell, put it in December and do an Avatar sweep. Not that this movie needs it because it's already the highest grossing film of the year. Not that the competition was that stiff. All that to say, Dune Part 2 may be one of the most important sequels to come out in the modern era because it's a franchise that a young generation can see actual filmmaking is put behind in. And I say this, and I think it's very important to say this, Dune is going to be the introduction movie to a whole new generation of science fiction fans. These two movies are playing at a time when we are inundated with just too much of the same franchise schluck. So when you have an auteur director, I don't care what anybody says, Denis Villeneuve is an auteur director. When you have him come in with a clear vision for this property that people know about, but they don't truly know everything about it, you can literally build this generation's Star Wars. Now, on that note, I want to say this. I have saw comments saying that this is going to be the Star Wars of a generation, and I'm more thinking this is the Lord of the Rings of this generation, where an auteur filmmaker with a specific vision is taking a popular source material and making it modern and fresh for a whole generation that's going to come to love it, and it's going to get a bunch of awards buzz. Dune, to me, is the Lord of the Rings of the era. The Star Wars of the era are the Avatar movies because it's just Cameron going off in a weird direction. All right, Dune 2, the most beloved film of the year, and I'll say it right now, it is the film of the year. I have no doubt in my mind that this is going to be the film everybody comes out of the year talking about, praising, giving awards recognition to. It's going to win all the production awards. It's going to win all the technical awards. It's going to win a lot. This movie is very impressive, and I went into this not really sure what to expect. A lot of critics I love and respect were praising it. Some I also admire and respect didn't really like it, and that's okay. Have your own opinion, form whatever you want. You don't have to conform to what the norm wants of you. I thought the first movie was pretty good. This has never been a source material I personally connect with. I've never been the biggest fan of Denis. I think his best movie is Sicario. So if you want to, okay. I think he's really interesting as a filmmaker, but this is just a franchise in a world I can't get into. The first movie, I thought it was really good. I went into this one. I went into a packed house with an audience that was willing to accept this, and the theater erupted into applause. Everybody unanimously was really vibing with this movie. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, this really isn't connecting with me. I am sad to say, I am truly devastated to say, Dune Part 2 did not work for me. This is not me to tell you it's a bad movie and it's horrendous and nothing truly works in it, because that is not true. This is going to work for so many people. And that led me to this conversation I was having with myself, which was, what are the things that didn't work for me and why are they working for other people? And I don't know the answer. Maybe there's just, this is a big thing I want to talk about, and I kind of brought it up already, like this is the sci-fi movie for a generation. There is a generation now, the letterbox generation, if you want to call it that wants a big sci-fi movie that takes itself seriously and has a big premise, and it's got stars of this generation that people of this generation like. Chalamet, Zendaya, Florence Pugh, Butler, all people who, if we were in a different type of movie era, would be movie stars instantly. I would hesitate to call any of them movie stars, except for maybe Chalamet, because he got Wonka to 600 million. But they're actors people like, with a property you can do something cool with, and a director, a modern auteur that people respond well to. So I think if you, how do I say this? For a generation that has yet to fully dive into film, this is going to look like a brilliant masterpiece. And it is. I always watch old movies, and I know that is not a common thing for a lot of people my age, in their mid-20s and younger. And I am not telling you, and I'm not comparing this movie to an older movie, but the ideas and the style that we're playing with, they're not uncommon to me. If you are somebody who doesn't see a lot of movies or has yet to experience a lot of movies, the things in here are going to look really good. And on that note too, if you are a young person, or you're of this generation who only watches blockbusters, or you're just somebody who watches movies, every movie we've seen in the past decade has looked really bad. The ones that have looked good have been very specific in tone. And I say this loosely because there are clear examples of brilliant movies, but I'd hesitate to say a blockbuster of this scale about a property this important has had cinematography that looks this good. So when you are from somebody watching movies now, and you see cinematography actually looking good in a movie, you see camera work actually looking good in a movie, that is going to impress you, because you have not seen that before. You haven't. This is one of the best looking movies out there. I can't argue that at all. There is a clear vision behind everything, and that leads to one of my personal problems with this movie, why I couldn't connect to it, which was Denis Villeneuve's obsession with the scale. He was really interested in the scale in the first movie. We're going to do panning shots to show you a soldier walking in front of a big tank. We're going to show you the vastness of the deserts. Everything's going to look big and grand. Everything is going to be sweeping and large in scale. And when your main focus becomes that, you can definitely see why Villeneuve made comments that he doesn't love dialogue. Now, for me, I am a big fan of dialogue. It's one of my favorite parts of a movie. A lot of the scripts I write, just for fun, they're dialogue heavy. I love when characters talk and say something witty or clever, or have a piece of just iconic moments throughout their dialogue. I'm not saying this script is bad. That's not what I'm saying. But you can clearly tell the focus for Denis as a filmmaker was not on the dialogue. And in that way, it's a lot like James Cameron. He's like, we'll do basic story beats, but we're going to hang out in this moment for a while. That movie's about water. This one's about the desert. But the other thing about James Cameron is he knows how to make a fun movie, and Denis likes to sit in ambiance. He likes you to just be engrossed in a feeling, a specific tone, and that's going to isolate some people. Like it isolated me, where I'm sitting here impressed by what I'm seeing. What I am seeing is impressive. There is a big scale to it. The effects are impressive. The cinematography is impressive. The costumes are impressive. The use of color is kind of mixed for me. There were moments where I like the color, and other times where I thought it was lit very interestingly. And I don't know if they use like real lighting on set, which is like a lost art form in itself these days, or if it's just like using specific filters scene for scene. Some of it looks great. The stuff in the desert looks great. I think a lot of like the nighttime stuff, especially in like the desert or in the ships, it's very junky and it doesn't go for the tone that they are going for. But when we go to the Harkonnen home world where it's like a black sun and it's all monotone colors, that is really hard to do. And for the most part, I think they nailed that. The way it plays off of every piece of light, that worked really well. But the moments where you can just see it's not clearly working, they really like just show you the fault in the very small cracks that this movie has. Again, I can see how every single person loves this. And I have no problem with that whatsoever. I'm not going to tell you don't watch this. You should watch this. This is an important film to watch, and it's going to define an entire generation of filmmakers going forward. I can see this movie inspiring hundreds of thousands of people into becoming directors and filmmakers and wanting to adapt older science fiction. This specific type of science fiction world as well is not my particular interest. There are themes in here I like, which we'll get to in a minute. But when it comes to classic science fiction, and I've talked about a bunch of classic science fiction on this channel if you're interested in that, I like things like Forbidden Planet and Barbarella and Planet of the Apes and John Carter, where it's like a Frazetta painting come to life with like this really weird energy. And those are more pulpy. I do think the Dune material is pulpy too, but Denis does not want to make a pulpy movie. Denis wants to make an art house, masterful blockbuster. He wants you to sit down and experience a feeling and a sensation and walk away confused about the morality of man and of God and of a disciple and Messiah. That's what he wants to play with. And when it comes to the specific story beats, that is where my particular interest came from. Because Denis is toying the line between worship of a Messiah and how hazardous the worship can be, which is a really important and interesting thing to explore, especially in modern context when we don't really dive into that anymore. If you've never read Dune, and I haven't, I'm not going to read it. I'll be honest with you all. I'm probably not going to read it or any of these sequel books that are about whatever, a big worm, whatever. The idea that I think Frank Herbert really like portrays in those books is just there is mythology based on the history of humanity, but we're putting it on like a wider scale, which is different planets and cultures accept different things. So the role of Paul Atreides is attributed to other things we might have seen throughout history, and it becomes this kind of interesting metaphor in that capacity. But also, Denis wants you to be like, maybe blind worship to a Messiah is the downfall of that said Messiah. Maybe there is something right in having Paul not become the chosen person to command all of the space or whatever, and we shouldn't like have this guy be ascended to that status because absolute power corrupts. It's very interesting. And the movie, I would say, for the most part, handles that okay. It does get kind of funny when Javier Bardem is just like, as it is written, he's the guy. Like that, a clear joke to make an audience laugh. And I think like the duality of Chalamet playing off not wanting to become this person to what he has to do to become that, there is something lost in translation where the shift doesn't feel super gradual, but it definitely could be presented there. The more impressive stuff is just having the Zendaya character be truly against everything. Her performance is very perplexing to me because I'm sitting here thinking this should be the performance of the movie. This should be the one where I'm like, oh my goodness, you are literally the only person who's not buying into the bullshit that Dune is presenting to you. And then she kind of gets lost in just like, I'm the, female character connected to the main male character, and I don't really get to breathe. Towards the end, she gets more stuff to do and more stuff to feel, and that's more compelling. But kind of throughout the first and middle half, she's just like, well, this guy's kind of interesting. I'm going to like him. Oh, I do like him. Sex, and then later she sees the hypocrisy in his existence, which is better. I wish I could walk away saying Zendaya blew me away. She just didn't. Same with Chalamet. I know the specific moments that audiences can react and be like, that's great. But you're not seeing those specific things throughout the entire piece. Now, there are a bunch of supporting characters in here, and everybody, I would say, for the most part, delivers a spectacular performance. I'm trying to think of somebody who wasn't compelling on screen. Rebecca Ferguson, she was fantastic. Brolin was fantastic. Javier Bardem was fantastic. Dave Bautista, fantastic. Skarsgård, fantastic. Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, they're great. I mean, Walken just shows up and just exists. So, can't really fail at that. And Austin Butler, who I think is going to come out of this probably getting a lot of accolades. He was impressive. He is definitely going to pick his projects well. Sometimes you just see a guy and you're like, oh, he's either going to become our hunkiest leading man or the best character actor we have ever seen in his generation. He is a great counterpart to Chalamet because this guy feels unhinged and Chalamet feels repressed. And that's a really cool thing to see. And, some characters, they don't do much. Leah Seydow shows up. She doesn't really do much except be sexy, which, hey, I'm not going to complain about that. I get it. And Pugh doesn't do that much except be another woman there. Look, this could be its own baggage to get into it. I don't want to spend too much time on it. The female characters are either written as, like, concubines for, like, a superior male, or they're witches who control the fate of the universe, which, if you ask Denis Villeneuve or Frank Herbert, I would 100% see them having opposing opinions on the role of a woman on the scope of like a galactic government. But that's neither here nor there. That's hardly a part of the movie. What is a part of the movie is a lot of time in the desert, which all looks great for the most part, except for some of the lighting problems I talked about, and some scripting dialogue issues between actors who are just told to present this as the whatever, as opposed to making those scenes feel as important and scaled up as the actual, look at the big ships, which kind of sucks. If you put a little bit more effort into just making these quiet, intimate moments feel as big as the big scale, look at us go through the desert and attack the Harkonnen and stuff, I feel better about it. And I know Denis can do some good action. There's a couple of really good action beats in here, a couple that don't really work. Not really editing. I think it's just more like, where are we going to put the camera to make this look interesting? He might have second-guessed himself a couple times on that. This is a very perplexing movie to me because I don't hate anything that I'm seeing here. I get every single choice that was made, and I know how this can connect to a lot of people. For someone like me, who does not really connect to this material, who looks for different things in his blockbusters, and has never truly, just been engrossed in the films of this era, it didn't pop for me the way it has for others. Now, I saw this with somebody who is a big fan of Dune, and they were just like, well, these are clearly choices that differ from the book. And I'm like, that is the case of every adaptation. Changing something from the source material means absolutely nothing to me, unless it is a fundamental change that ruins the flow. For Denis wanting to focus more on the romance, that makes sense because it's a fucking movie. People want to see the romance. They want the conflict between Chalamet, Pugh, and Zendaya. They want to see that. So that's fine. It just would be better if, I know they have good chemistry off screen, it'd be better if we just saw that in the movie. I don't know about this one. I really think this is going to be the Barbie Oppenheimer of this year. It's going to sweep everything. It's going to be talked about forever. And just sitting here not being able to feel anything about this movie truly is heartening. Because this should be specifically my cup of tea. I love all this stuff. A gladiator planet where Skarsgård and Butler kiss each other because they're weird and oily. That should be really cool to me. But That was my favorite moment, but I don't know, just I guess the larger scope and the obsession from Denis clearly wanting this to feel so large. That really hindered a lot of my enjoyment. Where I've seen movies that he's inspired by. I know the stories he's inspired by. I know the exact beats he is going for. So when we're just like flying in the desert and here's a big dune and I'm not blown away by the sight of like, look at the camera pan up to show you the size of this tank and the soldiers walking in front of it, and then boom, they come out of the desert. The actual like visual of that is interesting, but that isn't blowing my mind. That being said, I am super happy that a hardcore, drenched in political ideas of science fiction is connecting to a large audience. The fact that this is working is really cool to me. It would give me hope that more of these classic science fiction books could be adapted into movies as opposed to 10 episodes of television. Because what if we did Foundation like this? What if we did Silo like this? I think we just saw that we're doing Neuromancer on Apple, which are just like, why not make it a fucking movie and go compete with Dune? Like, do we need more auteur directors to yell at you to be like, you got to read this classic book? I can't think of any, but why? Why aren't we doing more of that? I don't understand. I hope this starts the trend of that happening. But I'll break it down really quick for you. Cinematography is really good. The directing is strong. The dialogue and some of the chemistry isn't that strong. The lighting does have a few issues here and there. And overall, I think the way the culture is going to be thinking and talking about this piece is more important and interesting than the film itself. It's worth checking out in a cinema. There should be a 70mm screening near me in the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping. If there is, I am definitely going to go see it because I only saw this in IMAX. And look, the cinema I saw it in, I'm not going to shout them out. They've had projectionist problems before where some of the things clearly just aren't lined up properly or they're out of focus a little bit. I'm not going to say this movie was because I do feel like the use of a digital camera was important for how this movie feels. But parts of it, and I wholeheartedly believe this is specifically my theater, it did not look perfect. And I do think that was my cinema. Look, I'm glad people like this. I really am. And I think this movie is going to be worth talking about. It's going to be worth having discussions about. I know where Denis' priorities lie when it comes to actually making this movie. So that is different than where my priorities would lie when it would come to making this movie. But hey, the sandworm stuff looks really cool. Everyone did really good job. For the most part, the scale is interesting if you haven't seen that before. But I've watched Lawrence of Arabia, so I know what a cool desert looks like on film. I'll just say that. But hey, I'm glad. I am glad this is working. I have nothing against this. And maybe we'll do a separate video coming back and talking about like other classic sci-fi that should be adapted like this. Because I would love to see like a modern director that wasn't Andrew Stanton try to do John Carter again. This makes me really curious how Sydney Sweeney's potential Barbarella would look. Which that's more, I guess, in the James Cameron boat of like, we're just here for vibes and having fun. But whatever. You know, maybe we should get like the Daniels to do Forbidden Planet or something. I don't know. But there you go. So Dune Part 2, I'm going to give a very fine 6 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.